Good evening, everyone. I'm Vallabi, and I'm the convener for this evening on behalf of the collective Curating for Culture. Before we get started, may I please request you all to ensure that your devices are on mute, your WhatsApp tab on the browser is closed, and any electronic devices around you are on silent mode. These sessions are being recorded, and screenshots will be taken for documentation and dissemination purposes. Hope we have your consent for the same. Curating for Culture has emerged out of collaborations and initiatives explored by Ishita Shah. Ishita is a designer, historian, and curator currently based out of Bangalore. Under the aegis of Curating for Culture, she has been facilitating learning programs and curating archival projects with a wide variety of collaborators. Prior to being an independent practitioner, Ishita has been an educator and coordinator to the UNESCO chair at Srishti Institute of Art, Design and Technology. She was also the founding archivist and oral historian at SEPT Archives, Ahmedabad, India's first repository for architectural planning and design related material. I would now request Ishita Shah to tell us a bit about curating this series and then introduce our second speaker of the series, Vrinda Pathare.
Thank you, Vallabi. For some of you, the introductions might be a repeat, but we'll continue to do so because we keep getting new registrations. And we're quite excited about welcoming as many more members into this conversation as possible. So we're thrilled, yes. Hello, all. We're thrilled to have you all participate again. Most of you who are coming back, and so many of you who joined us in the last 2 days. Um, so the collective practices that have formed under Curating for Culture have been geared around three aspects: cultural preservation, creative exchanges, and community engagement. We continue the same logic, or we continue the same aspects through this series, where we have a week long of conversations with 7 different practitioners who will take us through a variety of archival engagements. Something that I missed out on day one was to share how we have seen through the 4 themes while curating the series. The first was South Asia, India in archives. We had Dr. Siddiqui with us, who spoke about politics in archiving through her work, which is focused on architecture as a form of knowledge. Today's theme is a day in the life of an archivist, and Vrinda has graced her presence to share her experiences on this subject. We have Beyond the Institutional Narrative, which will be addressed by TV Dinesh and his team from Janastu, which is on 11th of June. And then Empowering the Local through Smriti Mehra's work, who's an artist who works with archival practices, on 13th of June. And at the end of this week, on 14th, having heard all of these different presenters and having heard them share their experiences, we'll meet again as a collective to exchange our concerns and ideas about the evolving archival practices across the country. So back to introducing Vrinda, I would like to go back to our early interactions when we both met as presenters at the Oral History Conference in 2016 in Bangalore. I just moved out of Ahmedabad after a long stint at SEPT Archives, and our conversations in and out of the conference were full of curiosity about each other's work as an archivist and a fellow oral historian. I had just 3 years of experience, whereas Vrinda came with a lot more. And since then, it has been very exciting to follow the work of Godrej Archives, a very unique space, and the work that Vrinda and her team have been engaged in since a very long time. So apart from that, apart from being the head of archives at Godrej, Vrinda also holds many institutional positions, as again you can read in the formal introduction. And one of them, which I think where we closely connect with, is her being the secretary or a member of the Oral History Association of India. And hopefully through her presentation, through her talk, we'll know more about her work around there as well. So thank you, Vrinda, so much for accepting this invitation and engaging with us. Over to you.
Thank you, Ishita. Actually, it's my pleasure to talk at this conversation that you had organized, because I remember our meeting, and I was actually, at that time, for the first time, I heard about the Sept archives, and I was quite excited to know about it, because it's amazing to actually trace the history of architecture in India, and that's what Sept archives is doing. So that I got to know when I met you. So thank you for inviting me to this forum. So when I was actually asked to talk about a day in the life of an archivist, it actually reminded me of the memes that keep making rounds on the social media, like what your friends think or what your parents think you do and what you actually do. But here is my chance to explain that to those around me, who sometimes keep wondering what really archivist actually does. So this is the opportunity that I'm going to seize today. Means, as you know, that in India, archivists are pretty rare species, but it is quite heartening now to see that the tribe is growing, and there are a lot of institutional archives such as Sept are like popping up, and many are now engaged in conversations such as this one that we having today, to explore and rediscover the ideas of archiving and the meaning of archiving. So let me begin with a day that made me realize as to how daunting is the task ahead while setting up the archives in my initial days at Godrej. I joined Godrej in the year 2006, and I was just 5 months old in the organization, and we received an email from a researcher from USA who wanted to refer to records pertaining to soaps. And not many in the organization at that point of time knew about our existence on the campus. So when this gentleman arrived at the security gate, I got a call from the security personnel asking, where we are located, and he didn't know about us. So he just generally asked that, what we do. So I tried to explain him and simplify what we do by saying that, we collect old records and old material of Godrej. So he listened to me quietly and replied with a great conviction that, oh, you are from the scrapyard. And I was really like quite shell shocked at that point of time. But that day made me realize that archivists can no more be restricted to just collection, arrangement, and cataloging of records. But we also have to come out of our safe walls of repositories and initiate these kind of conversations with those who are actually oblivious to the concept of archiving as such. So. So thus I thought that we cannot just keep doing what we typically are expected to do, but also like took upon this challenge uh, that to communicate in more interesting and engaging way what the archiving is all about. So if someone really asks me today as to how a typical day in the life of an archivist is, I might have to say that there is no such thing as a typical day. Though we quite do a lot of things that are like generally expected from us, which are like core activities of the archives, like arranging the collection, digitizing, conserving. Our roles have actually significantly evolved over a period of time as the archives kept growing, and our roles actually kept getting extended, and we started absorbing a lot of other skills while we were archiving at this corporate. So when we open the doors of the archives every day, there will be something new that is waiting for us that we might discover in our journey, or we might find some new meaning in the existing records, or we can reimagine their usage in a different light. So there is this, what I can say is a tangible sense of the unknown when you enter the archives, and that's what makes our day pretty exciting. And during this pandemic, especially as we have closed the doors now and we are working from home, it has again given us an opportunity to actually rethink our ways we deal with our collection, or rethink our ways the way we are actually making these collections accessible. So now actually our days are occupied with thinking about these and reimagining our purpose. So what I would be doing today evening is, will I take you through our journey and how the role of archivists kept changing as we grew year by year. Um, so yeah, so when I joined Godrej, my day would begin with reading the existing material on Godrej, the literature on Godrej that is already published, just to understand the organization's history and to understand the timeline of Godrej. And also, I started meeting heads of the businesses as well as the heads of the departments just to understand the organization structure, what kind of departments are there, what kind of businesses are there, what kind of products are being produced, what are the different processes, and trying to make sense of the timeline that what were the milestones in this whole journey of, say, 100 plus years. So the motive was also to understand the range of records that the businesses might be creating while doing their routine things every day. So I would, once I actually get these notes from these meetings, I would be back at the archives, and then we would be actually brainstorming as, what kind of collection that we expect in the archives, what we can accept, what we can reject, and what can be discarded. So how these businesses also can transfer the records to us, what kind can be the process to just ensure the regular flow to the archive. So all these things we kept brainstorming about in the archives after meeting all these people. So these conversations that we did in the initial months really helped us in formulating the archive policy. And we actually did that in the very beginning because we needed to have this policy in place so that we can specify the scope of the collection. Of course, that keeps evolving. And even the selection criteria is also very important to see what to keep and what not to keep, because this is very important in deciding, because just to ensure that archives is not treated as a dumping ground. So that's why all these things were really needed after these conversations. So that's what actually occupied our earlier days. And during one such meeting, I was actually handed over the collection that was accumulated during the centenary year when Godrej was celebrating 100 years in the year 1997. So this centenary collection includes the correspondence and the letters of the founders, Ardeshir and Piroj Shah Godrej. So they talk about the philosophies and the beliefs they believed in and the Swadeshi that inspired them. Even Ardeshir Godrej's handwritten note, as you can see here, about how to make safe or burglar-proof safe, or even the drawings that were submitted for the first patent, which are visible here, for the springless lock in the year 1908, or even Ardeshir's, the only interview that we have where he talks about his Swadeshi leanings. So this was published in 1927. And then there were like variety of annual reports, balance sheets, sales and marketing literature. So basically, it actually gave us an idea of the company's sphere of activities and what kind of records that we might be expecting. So we actually, so this was the first collection that we started with. So our days would be engaged in sorting them, cleaning them, storing them, organizing them in subject categories that we could come up with. These were really just 8,000 documents to deal with, and also cataloging them. So because the collection was small, we could think about the metadata fields. And we were actually describing and annotating on these simple Excel sheets, because during these earlier phases, the budgets are also quite stringent. But then these going through this collection, meeting people actually really helped us laying down the processes right from the collection to the dissemination. And that kept us occupied for our initial months. And organizing, the company's history, or like say 100 years of history, is quite a Herculean task, especially because, there are sometimes very unclear provenance are there, values are unclear. There are like restrictions because you are working with just the finite resources, but then there are infinite demands. So as we were working with limited resources, we couldn't really invest in the acid-free boxes at that point of time. So we were using the simple boxes that we can actually make available for them. We were using simple Excel sheets. But we also tried to outsource the conservation and digitization, because we thought that this is, as this collection talks about the beginning of the company, we should immediately restore them. So thankfully that actually we did in the first initial year. And of course, later we set up our own digitization and conservation lab, but that I'll come back later. So our earlier stage, if you see, was about this existing collection, but there was more treat waiting for us on the other days. And one was the day that I remember was I got a call from an employee who informed us that, there are some records lying in the old factory at Lalbagh, which is in Mumbai, because I know there are a lot of people from Bangalore. But Lalbagh is the then industrial area where the Godrej made its beginning in 1897. And he said that there are some records are there. He wasn't aware of what kind of records. And since the sales and marketing department moved from there in 1970s, their records were just lying there. So this call was quite an exciting one for us, and old records in the factory. So the unknown was waiting for us. So these kind of things really keep us, like excited, and we experience the thrill. And the next few months that we really spent in the factory shared, oops, going through these records. And that was, when we actually arrived at the factory, it was the usual situation, after crossing over or sometimes tripping over a lot of discarded material, abandoned material. We reached the factory shed where you can see how the records were laid on the floor. They were laden with dust, and there was growing culture on them. So for next 4 months, our days were spent here, looking through the dusty piles of records with our mask and gloves on. And actually, we couldn't really work for more than actually 5 hours here, because it was really quite a task to go through all this file. And appraising them was really out of question. So we were actually just looking at it, a quick glance we would do, because they were really very fragile. They were not in really great shape. But still we managed to, select the relevant stuff. And we actually could get some, 300, 400 plus files from here, which were amazingly, covering the period from 1940s to 70s, which is the post-independence era. And we could actually see from these records, you know, uh, so these actually were the records. So we could actually see how the post-independence era's challenges were, like license raj, there was shortage of steel, but still Godrej managed to produce a lot of new variety of products. There was also the growth of public sector that you can actually see from the orders that we got here, that were placed by these public sector undertakings that were emerging then. So you can actually see even like Bhakra Nangal Dam is being constructed. So they need chairs and tables. So these kind of national narratives also started coming in on, through these like routine kind of order related records as well. So this was really amazing. So there were also like documents from partition, as you can see on the left. It just says that inscription made in India should be marked on every product that will be now sent to Karachi. So these were like, very interesting thing. And the box that you see here also was discovered at Lal Bagh, which is the ballot box that was made by Godrej for the first election of independent India. So about the product, about the design, about its dispatches, about its distribution, everything was here in these records. And that also actually made us understand kind of records that will be coming to the archives. And then so on one day you might be compared with the scrapyard, but there will be also days where you will be struggling to explain or to what you can say, face the skepticism that is there among the managers about, because they think that history is a thing of past, and they will keep saying that, what is the use for the future. So those are the days where you need to actually use these records to communicate and reinforce not just the historical value of the records, but also its potential knowledge value, where actually these records can be used as a leadership tool, as well as the learning tool for the future generation of employees. That's when actually you realize that, archivist also has to spend days in thinking innovatively about the ways in which this can be communicated, and make people realize that archiving is also a knowledge system, and it is really vital for the future of the organization to make sense of the past and also decide about the future. So sometimes archivist also has to change his or her role and become a records manager as well. Uh, though actually these two are treated as different professions, but still in a company, where actually the records are created, but there is no system, I think archivist has to switch over these jobs. And then you also have to get involved into also capturing the present things that are going on in the company. So mapping this knowledge is also becomes the part of your daily activity, which is like, which the information that is currently available also has to be tracked. So then these surveys, record surveys that we take up are actually quite essential in the archivist life, because that's how you are going to get your records. And so we also did one survey, not just of these old records, but also the current records of one division, which was the younger compared to the other division, which was Godrej Aerospace, and where we actually tried to see that what are, currently, what kind of records are currently being created. So we spend the days, again, these actually sometimes that you have to really sit in such kind of spaces to go through the records. And these were the records that were given us by the Godrej Aerospace. So we had to really go through each and every record. But it was really amazing to see. And these are the joys of every day of discovery that, archivist experience. So we found the drawings of Vikas engine that was made for the satellite launching vehicle. So this was the order placed upon Godrej by ISRO. So then you actually start connecting the organization history to the whole national narrative of the technological development. So then that makes you more exciting, and that those connections actually keeps you going, and try and find more and more such records. But I should also warn you that these survey work can be really heavy, as you have to lift things and volumes of records. You have to get your hands dirty. It can be really dirty as well. So, but after such work, the joys of everyday archivist life is that you are left with an amazing feeling, being responsible for preserving like 100 years of history. It's really quite overwhelming, but still thrilling experience, exciting experience, because whatever you are going to select and keep is going to be cherished forever. So that feeling, that archivist experience every day after such a task is really quite amazing. So during these surveys, but the most challenging part is the selection. And I think we spoke about that also in the first session, that archiving is a political act. And so selections are really very difficult choices that archivist has to make every day. But then, you can't really, means this is daunting, but sometimes you have to select, because you can't just keep everything, because that would be putting pressure on your infrastructural needs as well. So you have to be conscious while selecting, but you also have to see that you are trying to collect as much as multiple truths as possible, so that history is a little balanced. But those are difficult choices that archivist has to keep making. So if you see, during this first phase of setting up, our days would be spent in understanding the organization, its structure, its history, its timeline, locating records through such kind of surveys, and also laying down the policy, defining the scope of collection, procedures for the surveys as well as transfer, for arrangements, and also deciding the descriptions and metadata fields. But as the records started coming in, we were soon realized that we need more space, than what was given to us. And then the negotiations part also become your daily task, and you start negotiating with the managers for getting more and more space, and discussing these infrastructural needs and communicating them to architects, engineers, safety officers also has to be part of your daily routine while setting up the archives, as well as maintaining it later. And these conversations with these kind of subject experts are very essential, because you have to create the climate controlled areas. You have to understand the temperature, humidity. You also have to think about the disaster management. So these are the conversation very helpful, because you have to maintain this space later on. And so archivists need these kind of supports, infrastructural support from the organization. And that's why building a rapport with these service providers is also a skill that archivists should have while carrying out the daily routines. So besides actually, but besides creating, these kind of physical spaces, the archivists also have to create an environment which is favorable to the archives, especially in the corporate setting where it is mostly looked upon as a cost center or a nostalgia trigger. And therefore, the main task that archivist has to take upon himself or herself is to sensitize everyone in the organization about the importance of archives and making history a usable past. And that's when actually your marketing skills are required on a daily basis, where you're trying to sell history to the business world. So that's also become part of your daily thing. So what we did was we started conversations through our website. Even though we didn't have anything to populate it, we still started the website at least to make people know that what archives is, what kind of records can come in, giving them the FAQs, giving them the records transfer forms. So that's how actually we started using the website. We also started contributing to our in-house magazine, so that there is always, so now actually there are like 4 pages dedicated to archives in this in-house magazine that comes up. It's a bi-monthly thing. So that actually becomes really the conversation points for us whenever we are going across the organization. And then actually what we did was the reaching out therefore becomes really very important. And that's when we actually started with these little conference conference room exhibition, as we used to call it, because again, we didn't have budget. So whatever we could do was like arrange something, do the photocopies and keep those things on display, and then inviting employees to engage with this material, see it, explore it. And we really started getting very interesting response. And one day I really would never forget when actually there was the senior manager of marketing from Godrej Interior visited the archives, and he got interested particularly in one ad which was there in one of the exhibitions and that was the supplement of 1955 that we had just put on display. And then I actually went and like started speaking to him. He said, it is really astonishing to see that we were manufacturing hospital furniture in 1955. He didn't know, and he was the one who was actually trying to reintroduce the hospital furniture at that point of time. So he wasn't aware that in 50s and 60s Godrej was manufacturing this. So then he actually wondered if this ad they can use to establish the credibility in the market when they are again reintroducing it. So these kind of incidences that happens in your archivist life actually help you to appreciate that such exhibitions could actually provide an opportunity to demonstrate the commercial value of the records as well. And then it also helps you to increase the interest among the employees for the archives. So we made it a point that now we have these kind of exhibitions on a regular intervals. The scale, of course, differ depending on the budgets that we have. But then in the year 2017, which is 11 years after we started, we got the sanction for establishing more permanent exhibition in the year 2017. And because we thought of creating the middle spaces, because we realized that only the researchers are coming to the archives, only those who are seeking information are coming to archives. But for the general employees, for the general public, if we can create a middle space where they can come and explore on their own the history of the company and history, the industrial history, it would be really fascinating. And that's when we actually thought of creating this kind of a space, and we engaged with the designer. And we wanted to actually make this space more experiential space and not just just like the displays, the traditional displays that we wanted to. And it was amazing to have these conversations on a daily basis with the designer whom we started working with. She's from Bangalore, Sarita Sundar of Hano. And it was, so we discussed at length for months actually about the stories that we wanted to share through this exhibition. And designer actually started asking us pertinent questions about the provenance, how you have got this. And she also wanted to add these archive stories of discoveries in this. So that actually made us really, quite exciting to think about our collection and revisit our collection again. So those were like, exhibition days are always pretty exciting for us, as you can go on finding new meanings out of the records that you have been preserving so far. But again, the choices are difficult. What you will be putting on the public pedestal would be, those choices you have to make. But then we also started, making it more experiential, where people can actually pick up the record and see it. Of course, these were the replicas we made. We also tried to, make it like experiential through all the senses. So we created the old fragrances of the soaps as well, created the packaging of the soaps and distributed it. So these kind of things actually helped us in engaging, and then digital tools, we started using it. Now also we are still trying to learn about the digital tools that can be actually used for virtual experience of the history as well. So this learning keeps continuing at the archives. And then, of course, we also think that now actually archivists also should spend days in connecting with the communities and the stakeholders that are involved, may it be the society, may it be the employees, so internal or external. I think connections, making connections is far more important nowadays for an archivist, and he or she should spend considerable time in thinking about the ways in which they can communicate and engage with such communities. So what we started with was connecting with our new recruits, and now it's a practice that new recruit batches are sent to the archives, because now that we have a space and where we actually educate them about the legacy, about the values that company cherished over the period of time, and talking to these new recruits and to inspire them and move them and to entertain them at the same time is quite a daunting task, and my team does it really quite well. So this part of the job is this, the front of house entertainment and engagement role is also now part of your daily archival activities. And we are also trying to educate the youngsters by connecting with the schools and colleges so that they are introduced to the topics of business history, so that we have a future audience as well. So these are the unique ways that keep us occupied. Explaining them what archiving is all about, answering their queries is really amazing experience. But apart from connecting with the youngsters, what we are also trying to connect, and Ishita also mentioned about oral histories, is to capture even the hidden voices and interacting with those who have been associated with the company for decades. There are people who have been working with the company for more than 25, 30 years, and they are really mine of information. And one cannot really ignore these personal memories or anecdotal details, as they can, as they really contribute to what I can say the transgenerational knowledge of the organization. And these individual stories emerging out of employees' own experience add to the collective experience, and the collective memory of the organization. So pulling out these multiple voices is quite a challenge, and into something which is what's called the sanitized history. But these are the multiple voices that you need to balance out the narratives in the archives. And therefore, now a day in a week is dedicated to conducting oral history interviews. So our HR teams keep sending us the database of those who have completed more than 25 years. We maintain that, we approach them, and then that's how our oral history collections are now growing, and they are now 300 plus. And this is what you are seeing on the screen is the exhibition that we made using these oral histories about the Navganis, who are actually the loaders in the company. And they are working with Godrej since 1940s. They belong to a village near Pune, and generations have been working with the company. Now they are now they are entrepreneurs, and they are providing services of transport and loading and unloading to the company. But these actually were the people who actually grew with the company. And but as in the absence of textual records, we actually did their story only through the way of oral histories. And those were really amazing experiences, that how they actually came to Mumbai to work with Godrej, why they are called Navganis, what kind of tools they use, how this traditional knowledge of lifting heavy safes, and they really do it quite swiftly and and without any damages, and their skills are really unparalleled. And then, so through their objects and through their oral histories, here you can see them listening to their own stories. We also recorded music, we also recorded a song that was about their village. We went to their village and recorded this, where this lady was singing this song. So these were really like amazing things that we could do with the oral histories. And we actually use boxes because that's how they actually lift the product. So these are pretty symbolic in that way. So that was actually the first exhibition we did using the oral histories. And that was quite an exciting. We did that with the Srishti college interns who were working with us. And then there would be days where actually there was a day when this designer actually turned up at the archives to study our old catalogs, and he said that he just was trying to get the inspiration for the future products that he was imagining and he was intending to develop for the company. And then the conversations with him were quite really interesting because we also got a very different perspective to look at our catalog. And then the way he actually tried to make sense of the catalogs, tried to get what were the features in the earlier cupboards that we had and how these features can be translated into the new product. So this was a really amazing experience. So even the logo that they used for the new product was inspired by the old catalog fonts that were used in those catalogs. So it was really amazing to experience these kind of things. So now we sometimes also engage with the artists now on some days. And in 2009, when actually Godrej announced the closing down of the typewriter plant, we got an email from an artist from USA, Jeremy Meyer, and he said that now that you have closed down the factory, can he get the spare parts, because he makes sculptures using only typewriter parts. So then we started thinking, and we thought that instead of sending him the spare parts, why not invite him over here and make him create some sculptures for us. So that's when actually Artist in Residence program was launched in 2015. And he made a huge lotus that you can see over here and mandalas, which are now adorning the cafe on our campus. But this was also a very interesting experience because the last batch of typewriters was lying around and nobody knew what to be done with it. So these are the things that, the way artists engage with an object or artists engage with a record also actually is quite learning experience from an archivist, and these conversations should keep going. And the other archives that artists that we worked with was Ali Akbar Mehta and Vidha Soumya, and they were creating these little silos on one of the Godrej Properties project, because now the factories had moved out and Godrej Properties were developing a land on one of our factory lands. And this is where they thought that, the reference to the history should be kept alive. And that's how, this silos actually came up. So this was also an interesting project to work with. So these are some of the things that we do on a daily basis, really like keep us going. Then we also, for 5 years, we were working on the research and for the research for this book, which was the Indian story of typewriters. We traveled extensively. We tried actually capturing memories of the typists, mechanics, collectors, everyone. And we didn't want to restrict it to the Godrej story, but we made it an Indian story of typewriter because that's the larger narratives we want to bring in. So these are the things we have consciously done over a period of time, and just to connect the organization bit to the much larger narratives. And this also, the book also gives you the tactile experience of the product typewriter. So this is how we have tried to keep alive the memory of typewriter, and maybe, soon we might be losing out these lovely products. But that's what we thought, that this is kind of a portable archive of a typewriter. So the book as a form of a portable archive on typewriter stories is what we try to make, so that it is accessible and people can read and enjoy these memories. We also now try and bring out our collections. So these were the photographs collection that we have, which we acquired in 2010. And Mittar Bedi was the industrial photographer then, whose collection we have. So we actually made this exhibition in collaboration with the Godrej Design Lab, where actually these were presented as the work of art, and a lot of photographers were invited to engage in the conversation over photography of 70s and the industrial photography. Mittar Bedi's daughters also spoke about his memories. So these are the kind of engagements that now becomes like a regular thing in our lives. And then we also try and communicate the importance of business history by this annual lecture series. So every year, a month is spent on organizing these lectures, and we have done these many lectures so far, just to actually initiate the conversation over socio-cultural and historical conversation over business history. And that's the main aim of this. So we spend days on interacting with the speakers, and finalizing them for our lecture series. We, for last 2 years, we have been engaging more proactively with the scholars because we realize that as an archivist, we are the custodian of the records, and we cannot really be objective while we are writing about the company because we are the insiders. We are part of the company. So that's when we realize that if we want to like go a little beyond of the sanitized history, we need to engage more with the scholars. So that's when we started engaging with them. We started the fellowship in 2018 and the Scholar in Residence program, which is still continuing. So this proactively encouraging research is also now part of our daily lives, where we are not waiting for researchers to approach the archives, but now we are making our archives available for such kind of research which we are trying to initiate through these fellowships. And this is the next project that we are working on, which would be published next year, which is on the design history of seating. So we are trying to bring out multiple perspectives, and that's what we think archivists should keep doing every day, to bring out the new meanings of it. And these engagements actually help you to even understand your own annotations, the kind of scope of collection that you are thinking about. You can actually keep revising that over a period of time so that you can keep evolving as an archive. So that's what actually we keep doing. So it also changed our attitudes about our access policies when we started doing these kind of projects. And we also realized that we have to now start moving towards the digital future and make it more searchable and make it more online. And that's when in 2014, we thought of setting up the digital lab. And also we thought of now install a digital asset management software, which can help us catalog more, more in an easy way. So that's when actually we appointed a digital archivist, and that was an interesting phase in our lives. So those, those days were quite exciting because this digital archivist send us queries every day asking us to revisit the relevance of certain fields that we had come up with. She made us review our ways capturing the data and made us realize the strength and the pitfalls of our existing systems. And this questioning, revisiting, evolving that we kept doing on a daily basis actually made our vision more broader. And that's how this whole digital activity started. And and now we also have a conservation lab. So what actually archives always have to prepare is to keep themselves updated, uh, uh, kept themselves actually updating the old system and adapting to the new versions of the archives. So that's on a daily basis archivist has to do, keeping his or her eye on the future, because with the digital technology changing every day, you need to keep yourself updated about the technology as well. So you can't now shy away from that. So now to just conclude, if I have to really describe my usual day, is quite varied. And given that I'm responsible for the entirety of the archives, and now we have a cataloging team, repository management team. And when I'm saying team, it can be just one person. But still, so we have a digitization and conservation team. So on any given day, I will be coordinating with them all. I would be planning a yearly calendar. I would be appraising the records that they have surveyed, supervising the arrangement of records, checking and editing descriptions, planning for digitization, conservation, conducting oral history interviews, or even checking the response that is being sent to a reference request, research room request, occupy my team a lot, and performing research, preparing presentations such as this, and editing content for social media and outreach, as well as we have our own archives times, and creating exhibitions, publications, and sometimes even like liaising with the donors who are sending us the collection, preparing legal contracts, researching archival theory whenever I get time, and the list can go on. And so, but while doing these tasks, archivists must also be aware of the budget. So that also is, the financial skills are also nowadays very important, and also the infrastructural needs. But what I think every day archivist has to do is he or she should be willing to adapt to the changes, is what I have experienced, especially now that we are in a crisis like situation like we are facing now, when our doors are shut at the moment. And as we are working from home, we cannot really access our physical space. But thanks to the steps taken to digitize some of our collection, we can actually access this collection remotely, and we are able to continue to support the departments and the businesses whenever they have any queries. And now actually companies expecting from us to document the COVID preparedness and the changes in the policies of the company during these difficult times. So we are also capturing the present while working from home. And this crisis has made us change to, and now made us aware about the digital tools that we should keep exploring, so that we can also give the virtual tour to the archives later on. So the day is now, now in the post-COVID days, working from home, the day is a mixture of research and collection work. We are receiving the digital records, and social media interactions are helping us to be in touch with our external audience. So today I would say that archivists should look at the archives as a collaborative space where you can be the co-creator of knowledge, where you can actually collaborate with the writers, journalists, historians, and you can actually unfold the unknown. So this entire thing of discovering, opening, unfolding, unraveling, and extending should continue on a daily basis, to just, and then multiple truths will emerge out of your collection. So that's actually makes our day not really so typical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vrinda. You almost opened the Pandora box for us when you said a day in the life of an archivist. Almost wants me to go back to being a full-time archivist all over again. Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, especially because you tried and covered all different faces and expose us to the whole idea that it's not as, it is managerial, it can get boring, but there is so much that can happen in terms of creative explorations as well. So without any further delay, we can move on to the questions because there are quite a few already in the document. Vrinda, you also could see it. Yeah. I would request all the participants to keep the questions short and tight. It's already 6:45. So we should be prepared to end this by 7:30. We'll take about 30-40 minutes to cover all the questions. Okay, so first question is from Sukhada. If you could unmute yourself and speak to Vrinda.
Hello? Hello?
Yes,
we can hear you.
Yeah.
Hi, Vrinda. Thank you so much for such an interesting lecture. And actually, I would like to hear about what will be the job opportunities in this field, because many of students are very struggling in between. Like they are post-graduated in history or museum-related fields or archaeology-related fields. They are already studied that, but they don't have jobs or they don't have that exposure. So I would like to hear from you that what will be the further scope in this field, like archiving and something. So because this is like company archive you are working in, so this is like a different field. I found it very interesting because last year only I did 6 months project with Past Perfect Heritage Management, and I was working with Bajaj Archives. So that was a family archive. So this company archiving is a little bit different than family archiving or history based archives. So I would like to hear from you the kind of scope for this, particularly for in between people, which are who are struggling a lot because they don't really know about what should they do in further. Yeah, so that's, I would like to hear from you. Thanks.
Yeah, means now actually, if you had asked me this question say 10 years back, I wouldn't have been able to say that there are job opportunities. But now actually there are a lot of institutions which are coming up with, it's not just the business archives, but there are a lot of institutions, science institutions, educational institutions, which are actually setting up or thinking about setting up the archives. So actually the history students have to be just open to these kind of spaces, and they also should actually try and train themselves and mentally prepare themselves that this is not the history that you might have studied at your postgrad level, but this is a contemporary history. These are like the technology history, but you should be open to do such kind of histories. And it again depends on institution to institutions, how much budgets that they have. That will definitely decide what kind of opportunities that they can actually give you, job opportunities that they can open up. So you have to just keep looking. Means I also accidentally became an archivist, so I think you have to just keep looking for it. You have to just see where your interest is, because sometimes in archives you have to just sit with the documents, go through it. So there are certain skills, like not so much the professional skills, but these kind of disciplinary skills that you have in yourself. So those are the things. But and Past Perfect is doing really amazing work. They have amazing projects they are working on. So there are now opportunities, but of course in this year, I think with the COVID, I don't think a lot of companies would be hiring. So right now I can't really say much about it. But yes, means there are. You just have to keep your eyes open for different kinds of archiving that is happening in the country at the moment.
Thank you, Vrinda. We have a question from Aparna.
Yeah. Hi, Vrinda. Thanks a lot for the excellent insight into the journey of Godrej Archives right from inception, and it was good to hear the words like policies and decision making today.
Yeah.
I was certainly very glad that you pointed out the distinction between archiving and records management at about the 20 minutes of the presentation. Certainly records management is related more to corporate or organizational archives, which is dealing with just the company. However, my question is could be more generalization of the misconception and lack of understanding amongst people. So in the current day scenario, we often see the distinction between different functions within the domain of archiving is not known or understood by all. Again, that goes towards the lack of education. Often the act of digitization or anything available in digital itself is considered as archiving by many, whereas it is just a means of presentation or access. What are your thoughts about this lack of understanding amongst people?
Yeah, actually, there is, means sometimes I feel nowadays the word archiving is pretty used quite loosely. So, so that's actually what even like disturbs me sometimes. So anything that you're collecting is also like archiving nowadays, or even if you're photographing, it's an archiving is what people use it as a verb. But yes, means of course those meanings also can be explored. But I would say that archives can only become an archives when you are making those choices, when you have systems in place of retrieval. So unless and until it is retrievable, unless and until it is annotated, it is described properly, I won't call a collection an archive. So that's actually the seriousness of documentation comes in, and I think that is always has to be emphasized, and not just mere collection, because collection without description, without access, is not going to be an archives. So that's why these description tools, these annotation tools have to be learned by anyone who is actually setting up the archives. And again, as you pointed out, digitization is also anything that is in digital form, or anything that is digitized on any kind of a scanner is regarded as an archival thing. But it's actually not, because for if you have to like really digitize it as per the archival standards, you need lot of space, you need good scanners, the standard scanners, and not just any scanner, and not at any resolution. So there are parameters and standards for resolutions and the formats that you have to keep digitizing in. So there is lot more things that I think one should be looking at when it comes to archiving. It's not just like just exhibiting, or it's not just like putting some old documents out there, but there is like a lot of serious back office work that goes in, which can actually make these kind of reaching out things possible. But that core activity of like I hope I'm answering your question. If I missed out, you can just point it out.
I think like the previous question Sukada had was trying to understand what all comes under archiving. I think we need more this is also a suggestion to Ishita and people who are trying to bring in such kind of platforms to people to even educate that it's not just this or that. There are multiple streams within it.
Yes. Yeah, and I think you also pointed out about training, and I think training is something that we are really lacking at the moment, because there is only one training institute available to us, which is National Archives of India. But then you have so many different kinds of collections that are coming in now, and I think you need to devise your own ways of looking at it, and I think more and more training is really needed, and I think we also will address that soon. But let's see
I
how.
will do that when I'm back next week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Aparna. Your point noted. I think one of the reasons or one of the larger interests of this exposure series was to bring out all of these possibilities to mainstream archiving as a form of practice. And what you said is the intention. So right now it's 4 speakers and 5 talks, but we keep building this and we keep finding ways. So one of the things I would do as a moderator on 14th is give a context of my own practice, which sort of ended in me doing 3 workshops in the lockdown, which was not training, I can say, but yes, still the whole idea of opening up archiving as a practice to public. Without any pre-eligibility qualifications or anything like that. And, those experiences led to this whole exposure series. So yes, we'll keep building.
Yep. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you. We have next question from Shivani.
Hi, Vrinda.
Yes, hi,
Hi,
Shivani.
Vrinda. Yeah, so thank you so much for the beautiful account of Godrej Archives. And drawing from what Aparna said, and you very rightly commented that there is just one institution which is training, students in the archival world, which is just National. I was a faculty there. So yeah, I understand. And more than that, I think they need to revamp their syllabus. They need to bring in more, case studies, which are specific to company archives, since there are many now. Like SBI or RBI is not the only business archive that we see today. There's Godrej, there is TCA, and then there is DCM, newly formed DCM archives in Kota. So yeah, my question to you is, so are there any guidelines which the HR has to follow as a part of record management at their level before the records retire or they, get transferred to the archives?
Yeah, so actually now we are not really making any distinction between, the current, semi-current, non-current records the way we had always seen the record cycle as, life cycle as. But in the corporate archives, actually the boundaries are little blurred. And we are part of the corporate HR department. So right now the policy is whenever any department is discarding anything, they have to consult the archives. And then archives team goes there, survey the records, whatever is historically important, then comes to our archives. So when this, so we had one incident when a very senior manager retired and his office was full of records. So the business just called us. We went there. We actually went through even his diaries, even his correspondence that was lying there. So now actually there is this policy in place whereby records which are no more required has to be surveyed by the archives. As far as the current records are concerned, as far as what we are encouraging them to send us as well, because right now the problem is everything that is created is in a digital format. So if you wait for 10 years, that digital may not be available to you if it is not archived right now. So that becomes a problem for us. So now we don't really follow the current, semi-current, non-current things. So whichever is important, like we have a criteria, like, minutes of meetings have to come to us. Annual reports have to come to us. Whenever the catalog is published, one copy has to be sent to us. So all these things, we have listed it down in our policy. So now even the minutes of meetings, which are actually confidential in nature, they just mark us on the email, and then we actually are recording it at our end. And we have a category called confidential records. So At the archives, we are keeping it for say like 10 years. Whenever business says you can open this up, we will open it up. But right now we don't really follow these kind of distinctions that at after these many years you should send us the records. Whenever they feel this has to be sent to the archives, we just take a call and we keep it. So because after 10 years there would be like digital dark age, because we might have lost all the emails. So, and that actually happens to even like 2 years back emails also to our like inboxes. Sometimes just emails disappears, so that shouldn't happen. And that's the very tricky world that we are living in of the digital bond digital records.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why we don't make such distinctions now. So we have just listed out whatever are the historically important records, even if they are 1 year old, even if they are 2 months old, we are keeping it. Only thing is originals sometimes are still with them, so that we keep tracking whenever they are throwing away records. So that's something. So that's the kind of system right now we have. But being a part of the HR department, I think we are also like the policy makers in a way. So that way we have an archive policy in a place. So that actually helps us. But of course, that doesn't mean that people are proactively sending us all the records. We have to keep following up, like everywhere you have to do. But yes, we are trying our best. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
We have next question with two questions from Vishwesh. Vishwesh, are you there?
Yes, I'm there. Hello. Yeah, so I had two questions. I think the first one, which was regarding, really what are the protocols and processes you've put into place to ensure that, material keeps coming in, and you've sort of largely answered that in terms of, the fact that you do go, collect the material when somebody leaves, and, people are sending current material like the minutes of the meeting.
Yes.
The second question that I had was, you sort of mentioned that you had these, neutral voices, your researchers in residence, and, who are sort of looking at, say, the narratives from a more neutral perspective. So it's a question which sort of also springs from that. What do you do, say, when in a situation when, say, a lot of these narratives or any of these narratives may portray the patron organization in a not so good light? I mean, what is the sort of protocol in place, to sort of document and communicate those narratives?
Yeah, actually, that's the dilemma, which is really very challenging in everyday life of archivists. So especially when you talk about the companies, lot of labor-related records sometimes can be, not what you can say, might hamper the brand image of the company. But what we are encouraging is like it should come to the archives, even if it's going against the. But when we are actually doing the exhibitions, then we might take a call whether to keep it on the public pedestal or no. So that actually, but when it comes to archiving, we are archiving all these things at the archives. For example, Bombay actually experienced the whole strike era in 1970s and the Datta Samant movement. And at that time, for the first time, there was a lockdown in the company. So there were a lot of these circulars that were like circulated by the labor unions across Bombay, criticizing, sometimes the company. But those pamphlets are also with us. Only thing is, when I think as an archivist, when we might be presenting a story, being a part of the organization puts a lot of restrictions, because company often looks at the archives as a brand building image or a brand building activity. So at that time, actually, we really have to be careful, because we are working for the company. But at the same time, as I said, because we don't want to just portray the sanitized version of history, we are encouraging the researchers to use our material in whatever ways possible. And even in our terms and conditions that researchers have to fill up, we say that whatever views expressed by the researchers are, not of the company. So these kind of precautions we take just to, what you can say, preserve or like save us. Means are like free to use the material and interpret it in the way they want to. But yes, but that actually is a limitation, and I think every institution and organization will face these kind of dilemmas. So being the insider, sometimes it becomes difficult to be objective enough, and that I think So what we can only do is just preserve the multiple truths, multiple perspectives of the history, and then historians are free to weigh it against each other and see what kind of narrative emerges. So, but when we are writing or when we are exhibiting, obviously we have to align with the company's values because we are the insiders, and sometimes that actually is a dilemma that we have to face. Means there is no escape from that. So, yeah, I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. Yeah.
At this point, I'm just going to bring in the question I had because it sort of connects, Brinda, and we have two more questions after that as of now. Is the fact that when you spoke about this high of memorializing history as an archivist, and more so than often when I work on projects or when we engage with participants, there is this question about subjectivity which always remains unresolved, but especially in an institutional capacity. Does it become overpowering, and how does one sort of deal with it? How do you tackle it?
Yeah, it becomes overpowering because these kind of dilemmas are really very difficult, and these choices are difficult. And I would say nothing can be really like objective enough. What you can only do is, as I've said, make available the multiple perspectives, because history is all about perspectives. So I think, as many as multiple perspectives are there, we can actually have multiple narratives, just to balance it out, and because everyone will not be objective enough when they're talking from their point of view. So the historian, I think, and historians are trained enough to, I think, weigh these kind of records, because sometimes also, when it comes to oral histories or when it comes to textual records, so even if the textual records are being created by a particular organization, what is being created is also, and who is creating or who is writing that record also is not really, is going to decide about the memory that we will be having of a particular thing. So I think, so every institution has that power, while even creating the record, that what they are communicating, what kind of narrative they want to communicate. So I think we just have to be conscious enough to weigh everything. We as a historian, maybe, or as a researcher, have to just conscious enough to bring in all the perspectives and then try and interpret in a particular way. But I think, yeah, even the textual records are not objective enough, even those are the written statements. Sometimes even, so there are also these questions about oral histories as well, how you can authenticate, but how you can also authenticate the textual records. So these authenticities, because institutions has this power over the records creation, I think, I don't think, we just have to be careful enough while reading between the lines while we are reading these records. So, yeah, but these are very crucial choices to make, and but that dilemma, I think, continues. But you shouldn't be worried too much, because the leadership of the company also keeps changing. And what may be difficult today, maybe 10 years afterwards, maybe company is very relaxed about it, or maybe company is more acceptable about the past. So that also happens, because many of the companies which have supported the Nazi governments, in Europe, now have accepted the fact that, okay, we had done that, but now let's move on. So sometimes you just right now in this space of time, I think you shouldn't be worry too much about it. What as an archivist one must do is just keep collecting things of different kinds, of different perspectives, and I think just make it available. So because you don't know after 10 years, 50 years how you will be re-looking at that. So I think even companies change, even organizations change, their perspectives change. So I think you should just don't worry too much about it. But what you do is just have those kind of multiple narratives in your collection.
So if I just take it a ledge up, basically, because sometimes there is a need to act in a certain socio-political environment or a situation. And in that, I mean, I'm going to make it a much more direct question, that do you think it's possible to even be an activist or an art activist being an institutional member? Do you think there is a possibility to react sometimes and not just keep being the person who keeps preserving and collecting?
No, these are the negotiations we do on a daily basis, because sometimes, when we are actually bringing out a narrative, say on women employees or say on labor unions, we keep interacting with HR and we try and, put across our points as well that, this is not going to harm the company, but this is just one, historical, what you can say, historical take on it. So you have to negotiate this. You have to put across your point when you believe in that. But of course, means ultimately what actually the organization decides, then you have to sometimes accept it. But putting across the point is you shouldn't be refrained from. So that actually something that archivists should be always open about their own, and they should be like open about what views they have on the collections, why they feel that these are to be in the public forums. So those things, I think, the archivist as a person has to be really strong enough whenever they want to put across such kind of points. But yes, these dialogues are necessary. Means you can't say that these dialogues are not necessary. You have to keep communicating that. So maybe in future generation of managers may realize it. So you have to keep trying. So you can't just shy away from that. So that's what I would feel.
Yeah, that's a wonderful response, I think. Yeah, to keep creating the space and keep digging the,
Yes.
carving the path for it. We have a question from Riddhi. Riddhi, are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful presentation. I have a question which is related to your initial part of the presentation, wherein you mentioned regarding the making of policies. So, can you share your experiences regarding the making of policies and various attributes of it and stakeholders, and the frames of reference which have to be kept in mind while making the policy?
Yeah, so actually, while doing the policies, you also need to understand your organization and the organization structure. What kind of records that would be this organization will be generating? Who are the stakeholders of this organization? May it be employees, customers, dealers. So that actually you first need to understand the organization itself. So that's what we did in the first initial months. In the policy, actually, is basically to guide us about the kind of record that we should be preserving at the company. The policy also actually highlights why we are doing this, because that's the statement which should go from the archives and from the higher ups to the organization, that why such activity is basically needed, and why it is really necessary to make available such kind of reference for the future. And also look at it from the knowledge management point of view, which is the language that companies usually understand. So thinking about archives as a knowledge becomes necessary, and that actually the policies should communicate. So while formulating the policies, as I've said, the surveys really helped us in understanding the records. So we, in the policies, we could actually formulate the scope of collection. But then we also mentioned in the policies that again, after the conversations with the businesses, we will decide even if it's out of scope of the collection, whether to keep the record or no. So all these parameters we kept, even the selection criteria we mentioned, which actually we listed out the 5 selection criteria, that record should have administrative value, then what kind of record that would be, then the record should be of historical importance. It should highlight something reflecting on the history of the company. It should have the legal value, because sometimes even the legal records are necessary for the future references. We also listed out the emotional value, because sometimes employees keep hanging to certain records because they are really connected with it. May it be an award, may it be a photograph. So even emotional value we inserted in a policy, because after like meeting people and trying to understand records actually helped us to bring out these criterias in the policy as well. Then we also listed out how the transfer should take place, who should arrange the transfer, how the boxes have to be prepared, how they are to be numbered. So all these nitty-gritties we actually like listed out in the policy. We also have the manual of procedure along with the policies. Then if we are actually buying a collection from certain someone, what are the SOPs that we need to follow, the standard procedures that we need to follow. So all these little details actually covering all the aspects of archives was there. Even when it comes to the archives, how they are to be cleaned, how they are to be numbered. So the numbering system we developed in the archives in the year 2006 itself. So how that numbering should be, what kind of categories should be put. So all these things are there in our policies and the manual of procedure, as we call it. And the references that means in the initial years, actually, I kept reading about the policies that were available online for different archives, how they actually spell the scope of the collection, how they actually go about transferring records, how they go about collecting stuff, what is the collection policy that they have, what is the conservation policy that they have. So I actually studied because there were not many business archives around when I started setting up this. So I also like spoke to the Tata Archives, what kind of policies that they have. So these were the learnings that I got from like different archives. Then we actually thought, and then we applied to our own organization structure. So it's actually quite a lot of studies that actually went in till we like formulated our final policy, and we keep evolving this policy. It's not that we have the rigid policy and now it's like done. So even procedures we keep changing as we keep changing our infrastructure. So those are the things that we do, and how actually we should be addressing the queries. If the employee has a query, then how, what kind of documents they have to submit to us, because that should be for the official purpose. If it is from the outsiders, what kind of documents we will need, so that it is a kind of like, since I don't want to use this word, but the bona fide query. So these are all those things, the terms and conditions for the usage of material. Even in oral histories, there were like a lot of legal aspects to it. Sorry. So, when we are actually doing oral histories, we need a consent form to be signed by these interviewees. So all those little things, which actually, because there are a lot of legalities involved as far as the copyrights or the provenance is concerned. So all those things actually become the part of the policies. So you have to just look at what kind of activities that the archives will be doing, and you should have a policy for each and every activity, and a procedure should be laid down in details. I hope I answered your question.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think you have very nicely and elaborately answered the question that I was asking.
Thank you, Riddhi.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
So the final question we have is from Anusha. She has, I think, 2 questions for you. Anusha, are you there?
Yeah, I actually have 3 questions since we have more than 10 minutes. So,
Okay.
So this is Anusha from Goa, originally from Mumbai, and having a museology and conservation background, and currently a training at National Archives of India, the 1-year diploma. So it's very amazing, very much amazing to know about the Godrej archives and the hidden stories that you shared. Thank you so much for that. And my questions are, what are your goals and plans to make awareness of the field archives? Are you planning to have temporary exhibitions, which could be like traveling exhibitions within the various parts of countries? Archives is yet very much unknown field and concept for the local people, lay people. And how do you like to pitch in? That is my first question. My second question is, do you provide internships, and what are the eligibilities, and etc. etc. And my third question is, do you guide other newly established archives who needs professional help, and do you have any staff training program for such institutes or such archives, and are you planning to have one? Yeah.
Okay, there are like lots of questions. Okay, so so your first one was how we are creating the awareness. So some of things actually I have already said in my talk. In the year 2006 itself, actually we started this annual lecture series, because what we realized is, okay, you set up the archives, you have all the records in your collection, but if no one is using it, it is useless. So that's why we thought we need to create the audience, we need to create the base of researcher and try to make them aware that these kind of collections are available. So the annual lecture was one form of the activity that we started, just creating awareness about the business history, because there were not many business historians around. So, and even IIM
Right.
Ahmedabad has now actually started the business history again, which is really great. So that's why, this was the thing that we thought that it is our duty to create the awareness for the business history. As far as the archive is concerned, we actually kept, contributing to the forums. Like there were like a lot of workshops that happened in the city of Bombay, which were about the art of archiving, where we tried to communicate. So we actually collaborated with the other organizations in Bombay and organized those kind of workshops. But of course, that happened only like few times. But what we are now doing is like we are approaching schools and colleges, and one of my team member is like completely like devoted to that agenda, that engaging with them so that we can really catch them young, and they can be the, what you can say, our ambassadors in the future for like business history and archiving. So schools actually are now approaching us because they want to learn the archiving, sometimes also the business history. So, and they are really thrilled with the conservation part of it. So we actually did a lot of workshops for the colleges last year, almost like 2 workshops we did for colleges. And that's when actually the colleges also have started demanding if the training course can be also made available, and that's what we also asked.
Yeah.
So we have now formulated one course, but right now we are not starting it because of this situation. But maybe next year we are planning to start a training program for the students as well as whoever is interested in archiving.
Wow.
Um,
Nice.
so that's what we are trying to do. Let's see how actually the things go now for next year. But that's the plan that we have for future. So let's see how that actually materializes. Then your one question was, and yeah, about also the traveling exhibition you spoke about. So we keep doing exhibitions, but right now they are only restricted to Vikhroli in Bombay.
Maharashtra. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
not Maharashtra also, only to
Yeah.
Bombay. So in Bombay, because it's like very easy to carry things, and then we can just, because we are based in Bombay. But now what we are exploring is the virtual exhibitions, because I don't know how the travels are going to be in next few years. So we, like last year only, we were exploring this feature of virtual exhibitions where we can also give the virtual tour of our exhibition on your mobile app. So that's what we are trying to build. But it will take time. I think by this year we should be doing that. Once I think our office is open, then we will be working on it. We are also trying to do the virtual tour for our campus, because the campus has a lot of historical information about, and also even the trees are like pretty historical on our campus. So we want to actually create these kind of narratives. So whenever anyone is like roaming around in the campus on their mobile app, they can just click on one of the plant, and then they will get the information about it. So that's what we are trying to do. Let's see how actually even we are exploring those kind of things right now. So I won't be able to say when that will happen. And your last question was about, I think, whether we provide professional help
Yeah.
to the other institutions. We
Yes.
do it in a very advisory role. We right
Okay.
now we haven't really started the consultancy kind of a things, because right now there is too much on our hands. But what we do is in an advisory capacity, we do help. So I'm also part of this RCWA, which is the Women's Archives in the SNDT University. So they are setting up their archives. So so I am just as an advisory role, I'm on their committee. So there are like, means in this capacity we can do that, but right now we don't have like a team large enough to like go and like help the other people out. So maybe in future, I don't know when, but yeah, I hope I've
Okay.
answered all your questions.
Internship.
Oh yeah, we have actually started internships. Means like for many years now we have been doing the internships.
Okay.
So we usually actually take interns from the history colleges, the Department of Histories, and also nowadays we also get the Department of English interns, because we have a lot of oral history collections to edit, copy edit, and transcriptions are to be done. And also for the content creation, also we sometimes take help of the interns from the Department of English. Recently, we got the
Okay.
interns from Srishti College. We also
Okay.
got the, even the design interns we are taking if we have any exhibition coming up. So we are also exploring, means we are open for internships in different ways. But there are now a lot of colleges who regularly send us the interns, especially because now they have the credit system, so we have tied up with them. So we have an internship program. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, and all the best for all the future plans. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So, Vrinda, I have one final question, which was only to understand if there has been sort of a public interface or a public exchange when you look at such private archives. So, are there any public institutions where Godrej Archives is now in an exchange mode, or are there public interfaces through which we interact?
Okay, can you just explain what do you mean by the public interface?
I mean, I'm basically referring to where the city starts meeting the collection, where the city starts meeting the history, basically. So, by whether it is the city archives, and is there a relationship between the content there, or is it that the exhibitions come to the road, or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah, so as far as the collections of the other archives are concerned, means we actually go there as the researchers more and tap actually, because the public archive that we have, but as more as a resource gathering from there. But what we have done is we do collaborate with different institutions, especially like there was this design exhibition few years back at the Prince of Wales Museum, which is now Chhatrapati Shivaji Vastu Sangrahalaya. So there actually they had this design story exhibition, and as a part of that, it was talking about the objects and its history. So what they had selected from Godrej was the locks, cupboard, and a refrigerator and the chair, the famous CH4 chair that we have, the S-shaped chair. So all these objects were then, so we actually collaborated with them. We worked on the content which was going from the Godrej archives, and we became the part of that whole design exhibition. So these kind of collaborations we do. But yes, means there is actually much more can be done. So even at IIM Kozhikode, they had actually a museum on Indian business history. So where we actually set up one section on Godrej archives as a part of the the business history that they wanted to showcase in that museum. Even the Partition Museum at Amritsar now has few of our documents. So, so we keep interacting with such platforms, and we want our collection, if they can be part of the much larger narratives, we would like to do that. And this seating in India, which will be coming up next year, is also a sort of an attempt to talk about and become part of these larger narratives. So we will be collaborating. Maybe we might be doing any exhibitions. Then we will let you know definitely. So yeah, so we try and do as much as possible whenever there is an opportunity of such. So, or even Kala Ghoda Festival, when actually Godrej Interior participated and made this huge installation using the Storwells, we actually helped them to put together the history of the Storwell, and that was displayed at the Kala Ghoda Festival. So we became part of even these city narratives as well. So yes, means we, as and when the opportunity comes, we try and grab it, because we want to be part of, and we want to be there out as well, because, Vikhroli is considered to be little far away by even the Mumbai people. So I think it's better to get the out and, communicate it more. And of course, social media helps us a lot. So yeah, so that's how we are actually, trying to do that.
Sounds exciting. Thank you so much, Vrinda. I've known your work, but it was still almost like, okay, knowing it all over again through this theme. It really helps revisiting these projects. So thank you so much once again for accepting our invitation, making time, and sharing your presentation with us. Everybody seems thrilled. If you see the chat, there are lots of thank you messages and appreciation messages. Thank you to all the participants. All of you coming up and showing up in so many numbers is a motivation for all of us in the field of archives, I think. For each other, I think we're motivating all of each other. Thank you, Vallabhi, for supporting the whole system at the back end. And see you all. Have a lovely evening. And
Thank you,
see you.
Ishita.
Thank you. And we connect in another alternate day, which is on 11th at 5:45 p.m. for the next session, where we'll have TD Dinesh, Bhanu, and Shalini talking to us from Janatstu. See you all and have a lovely evening.